I got started in archaeology when I was an undergraduate, somewhere between my junior and senior year. I had a chance to go on a dig in Israel as a student volunteer. And I was already a history major. I already loved history. I had since a young child. But what to do with a history major course is always a big question. And on that dig in Israel, when that was finished, then I knew what I wanted to do, which is to become an archaeologist, and I hope to actually direct my own excavation someday. In 1980, I came to NC State as a professor of history, assistant professor of history, and that same summer I started to dig a Roman legionary fortress east of the Dead Sea with a team from NC State. And then I've spent time, publishing, researching and writing. And the undergraduate students come in because most people think of archaeology as Indiana Jones out there finding treasures. The reality is that 95% of the work of archaeology isn't done digging it up out in the field. It's analyzing it in the lab, and time in libraries and in your study and looking up archaeological reports to find comparisons for what you found and so forth. And it's that analysis stage, and because the excavations I've had have been large ones, and they've been over many summers, we have an enormous quantity of artifacts here from those excavations, which have generously been shared with the university by the government of Jordan. And so we have a plethora of things like pottery sherds and animal bones and human bones and things like coins and jewelry and stuff like that that requires careful analysis and study. And just the processing and the registration of all these finds takes time too. So the undergrads here then have a chance to get hands-on experience with this material while still at a fairly early stage in their academic career. Early on, I've learned that sometimes, especially undergraduates without background, ask questions that I hadn't even thought of asking, and they offer answers that I hadn't thought of either, because they bring a fresh perspective, unbiased perspective in some ways, that I didn't have in mind with my long years of experience and so forth. I hadn't thought to ask that question. And sometimes the questions are just out of the blue. They can be very helpful. And so it's that pair of fresh eyes, that fresh perspective that can pay big dividends as we work on the material. You learn by doing. And on the digs, for example, at Aqaba on the Red Sea, or Legion, the Roman legionary fortress, within a week or so, students were actually supervising their own trench, a small team of local Jordanian workmen, keeping the field notebook, keeping, in fact, a record of what they were finding, writing up a weekly verbal report of what they had found in the mornings, and then in the afternoons working in the lab, processing this wealth of artifacts that were coming out of the ground. So they saw it come out of the ground. And then in the lab, I can discuss with them why this piece of pottery matters, What can a single artifact, tell us as historians about the history of a place and the people who made this particular item. Students often, they'll take a course with me and get interested in history and archaeology, or it's something that they've always read about, thought about when they were younger. They might have had an inspirational high school teacher who got them interested. They've seen a movie about the past, things like that. They come here and say, look, I don't really know anything, but I want to learn. And you learn by doing. As they gain experience here at the lab, I give them more and more responsibility. And I eventually have the students analyzing the artifacts on their own, and they'll just periodically check in with me. Hey, I was able to identify these 25 pot sherds. This one, I haven't got a clue what it is. And they'll show it to me, and I'll say, actually, I haven't got a clue what it is either, but let's go to some of the standard reference works and see if we can find it published elsewhere. And eventually, some of these students have gone on to serve, for example, as a pottery analyst for another excavation in the region because they have a skill. Great thing about our collection at NCSU is most countries in this region will not allow the export of anything, even on a loan basis. But Jordan's one of the very few countries in the region where you can still export artifacts, in most cases on a kind of a loan basis. And so here the students can get hands-on work with the artifacts during the academic year. And I ask students to commit to 8 hours a week. That is, that's enough hours to make a significant contribution, but it's not enough hours, I think, to take away from their academic work, which obviously is always prime. And I always tell students, if there's something really important, academically, whatever you're doing here can wait. Academics come first. Then the second thing I want is dependability. If we have a regular schedule and we have goals here at the lab, then I need you to be here at the times that I'm expecting you, other than these occasional emergencies that arise. Above all, I want curiosity. I try to give the students the context of what they're working on, to show them the importance of what they're working on, in essence. I tell students, the only reason that I'm where I am now is because when I was you, somebody like me took an interest in you. And I have, one, a great feeling of obligation to help students move ahead by mentoring them. Secondly, it's enormously gratifying to see students really succeed. And thirdly, they're the future. Of course, undergrad students are the future of my discipline, of all disciplines. And unless we give them encouragement and mentoring and insight, what kind of future will these academic disciplines have? I have to sometimes remind myself that they come in knowing very little. They certainly deserve good explanations of what they're doing, but their lack of experience is more than made up for by their enthusiasm and their curiosity. Archaeology, by its very nature, it's multidisciplinary by its nature, and the nature of the evidence is such, it's just so vast, that this really is an ideal place in which to involve really multiple undergraduates. I have 5, I think, now working here. More faculty could engage undergraduates in their research agenda if they thought more about it. I've worked with undergrads from other colleges. For example, I always have a student from the School of Design working here, doing things like drawing pottery and preparing architectural plans and other kinds of graphics work. Several of the students here now are actually anthropology majors because of its close connection to archaeology. In the past, I've had students from the life sciences. They're interested in, for example, zoology. Well, we have thousands of animal bones here that need to be identified and cataloged and so forth. And some of these undergrads, I'm proud to say, have gone on to grad school, earned their own degrees. They become archaeologists in their own right, are now professors at other universities. I've been here long enough to see them to go all the way through to that stage in their career. That's what's, I think, really special about this.
I'm very interested in forest systems and how forest systems interface with water and water quantity as well as water quality. Coming to this department in the realm of environmental technology was a good fit, but working in a forestry department has given me this opportunity to collaborate with other folks in forestry and to move up to research that really is more systems level. I'm very interested in sort of current ways that we use forests. We use forests in North Carolina to treat wastewater, and what are the implications of that with contaminants and emerging contaminants that we're concerned about, like Gen X. But I'm also very interested in how we can use forests to manage risk and extreme storms into the future. I also have a lab, and there's lab work that has to be done, but I really think it's just awesome cool that I get to be in both worlds. I like to work with undergraduates on things that I'm not sure about and that are somewhat beta testing. Because they are apprentices, you have to have reasonable expectations about what they can accomplish, particularly given their schedules, and that academics come first. And because I like that opportunity for discovery together, I have primarily used undergraduates in the past to try things out. And I think that's a great learning process for both of us in the process. You know, I don't really advertise that much. I guess perhaps word of mouth, but also perhaps I recruit from my classes. And I think we have great advisors in the variety of programs we have within our department that also steer undergraduates to different faculty for those experiences. I think you have to allow them space for their own accountability for the work that they do, and that is what best prepares them for what they're going to do after they graduate from NC State. I hope the skills that they gain are learning technical practices and how to implement those practices so that you generate data that you can use, and then learning skills for analyzing that data, and as importantly, visualizing and communicating that data. I think if you're at NC State as a land-grant institution, that you have several roles, and one is you need to be an educator, and that we can't prepare the next generation of scientists if we don't provide them those opportunities.
I grew up in South Carolina, right literally down the street from the University of South Carolina. I went there to get my bachelor's in chemical engineering. And while I was doing my undergraduate degree, I was kind of unsure as to like exactly what I wanted to do. So I started doing a lot of research in different professors' labs. Doing all kinds of things, including like running a pilot scale facility for handling like nuclear waste, which was pretty crazy because that was like late night shift type processing. One of the things that I've found was successful for me was kind of going around and working for different faculty for like 4-month periods when I first started, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and there's no way in which I would have known what I really wanted to do, right? Everybody's got a good idea what research is or what you would like to do in life, but until you get those experiences, it doesn't really congeal or come together. When I went up to Johns Hopkins, I did not like the research that I was doing there, and a lot of that was on me because I selected that research, to do that research, and because I wasn't enthused about it, I didn't really care a whole lot about what I was doing up there. Probably one of the biggest decisions I made was to come here to NC State to do research, because it's so much more applied than what I was working on. That made me closer towards industry, and having the startup experience combined with that really kind of helped force my decision on that and made me realize exactly kind of what I wanted to do. Industry is a huge deal for NC State, especially for the Wilson College of Textiles. I teach the capstone design course within my degree program, and in that program, industry comes in and they fund undergraduate projects, product projects, and they mentor those teams for an entire year. We're talking about companies like Patagonia, North Face, Under Armour. Industry is being represented not only at the undergraduate course level here, but it's also going to then extends all the way out to the graduate programs. And so for somebody like me, I can really kind of understand what the return on investment really needs to be from not only a product standpoint, but also from a kind of like a research and development standpoint for those companies. And that is a very unique thing to see at any university. I think NC State really does that well. One of the things that I would say is different about the research program that I have is that we are focused not only on the fundamental side of how things happen. So my graduate students, my PhD students, yes, they wear lab coats, and they know their chemistry very well, and they do a lot of process development. But there's also parts of research to where you can go and do customer discovery, especially if you want to be able to relate your research to industry, which I think is critical for both undergraduates and graduates to be able to explain what they do very clearly to industry. It's very important to go out and do customer discovery. A lot of times it's even benchmarking existing materials that are out there that are maybe commercially available, and comparing the materials and the products that you're producing or the prototypes that you're producing to those things. And a lot of times, I mean, that's not normal research, but it's still research. Undergraduates are a critical component to the research that we do in our lab. A lot of my graduate students, they come from places like biomedical engineering, physics, chemistry, and they don't necessarily have a true textile background when they get into my research group. So having the undergrads that are coming in and providing some of that textile expertise is a really great way to kind of get everybody up onto to get to the graduate students kind of up onto that higher thinking level with regards to textiles. They bring such an energy to the research that you have. They bring such creativity. They don't have the blinders on a lot of times. If you or like one of your graduate students have been working on something nonstop, it's really tough to see the other opportunities that may exist when coming into this. It's also just it adds in a lot of skill set development. So not only for like textile skill development, but a lot of design creativity. So in the Wilson College, we have two very different undergraduate programs. We have the textile engineering, chemistry, and science, which obviously is like textile engineering, textile technology, and polymer color chemistry. In the TATM, there are students that are much more design focused in terms of developing garments and understanding garment manufacturing processes. And so I love to go and get those students from the TATM and bring them over and have them interact with either the graduate students that we have or the undergraduate students that we have in TECS. And that has driven such great experiences. When I work with undergrads, I think it is a matter of setting up the expectations. Their number one priority while they're getting their undergraduate degree is maintaining a good GPA. So because that's what's going to end up determining them going to get a job or going to get into graduate school. If they have to not come into work 1 week because they have tests, that's totally fine. And if they have some weeks where they want to work more hours, that's totally fine too. I try to never hire an undergraduate unless I have a graduate student or maybe one of my project managers will be mentoring them. It's fascinating to see when you're a graduate student, those aha moments, they don't come very frequently. When you're an undergraduate researcher, those aha moments come really frequently because you're learning things on how things work for the first time. And so for a graduate student, even for me, to see a lot of those aha moments within the undergraduates, it knows that, number one, hey, I'm actually doing something right because they see it, but it's so inspiring.